A Daughter of the Samurai. Chapter 24. In Japan Again. When the weary sight of tumbling and tossing waves was past, and I was once again in Japan, I found myself in the midst of surroundings almost as strange as those I had met when I landed in America. The provinces and classes in Japan had for so many centuries held steadfast, each to its own customs, that even yet there were only occasional evidences to be seen of their slow yielding to the equalizing influences of modern life. And I had gone at once to Matsuo's home in western Japan, where standards of dress and etiquette, ideals and even idioms of speech were entirely different from those of either Nagaoka or Tokyo. We were met on our arrival by a crowd of Matsuo's relatives, all in ceremonial dress, for we had brought the sacred ashes with us, and from then until the 49 days of ceremonies for the dead were over, I was treated as an honoured messenger guest. After that, my position was very humble, for a son's widow is an unimportant person in Japan, and virtually that is what I was. Matsuo having been, until he decided to remain in America, the adopted son of Uncle Otani. I was very anxious about my little girls, for in Japan children belong to the family, not to the parents. Hanano, on the death of her father, had become the head of our little family, but we were only a branch of the main family of which Uncle Otani was the head. So it had been taken for granted by all relatives, my own as well as Matsuo's, that the children and I would make our home with Uncle Otani. He would have made good for me in his handsome house and would have supplied me with beautiful clothes, but I should have no authority even over my own children. This might not have been so bad under some circumstances, for Uncle Otani would have been generous in giving the children every advantage that he considered proper for them to have, but with all his kindness, and a kinder man never lived, I could not forget that he belonged to the old-fashioned merchant class that considered education beyond the grammar school undesirable for girls. The situation was difficult, for, from my humble position, I could not say a word, but I had one hope. Hanano, although legal head of our family, was a minor, and her mother, as present regent, held a certain power. Exerting this, I asked for a consultation with Uncle Otani. I explained to him that Matsuo had expressed in his will a desire that, since he had no son, his daughters should receive the liberal education that had been planned for them in America. Then I boldly asked, in Hanano's name and by the power of her father's request, that I should be allowed the privilege of guiding their studies. Uncle Otani was astonished at such an unheard-of request, but the situation was unusual, and a family council was summoned at once. In the case of a consultation concerning a widow, it is customary for her family to be represented, and brother being unable to be present, mother sent in his place my progressive Tokyo uncle, the one who had taken so vigorous a part in our council meetings before my marriage. It was necessary for Hanano, as official head of her family, to be present, but of course she was to speak only through me. Since she had not yet learned to wear Japanese dress properly, I put on her best white dress, trimmed with lace and ruffles. I arranged everything so that it would be very loose, for it is difficult to sit quiet in Japan fashion while wearing American clothing, and yet it is inexcusably rude at a ceremonial gathering to move, however slightly, the lower part of the body. I explained this to Hanano and told her how her grandfather, when 2 years younger than she, had held the seat of state in the formidable political meetings before the Restoration. Honourable grandmother told me he always sat very straight and was dignified. I said, and you must be like him. Then we went into the meeting. I could not help being uneasy about the way my bold request might be received. To most of the council I was nothing but a widowed dependent of my daughter, a woman with advanced and peculiar notions, and they had the power. If 3 voices of the council disapproved of me and my ideas, not only to refuse my request, but to separate me from my children entirely. I should be well provided for in my present home if I choose, or elsewhere, but the children would remain with their father's people, and no law of heaven or earth was powerful enough in Japan to prevent it. Matsuo's family had no desire to do any unjust thing, nor did I suspect that they had, but they held the power. The conference, which was long, consisted of a series of polite suggestions and earnest but never excited arguments. I listened with my head bowed, occasionally, but not too often, glancing toward my little anxious-eyed daughter, sitting erect and motionless in the midst of the dignified row of elders. For 2 hours she did not move, then one poor, cramped little leg jerked, her fluffy dress spread out, and with a quick catching at her knee, she gasped, "Oh!" Not a face turned towards her, but with an anguished clutch in my throat, I bowed to the floor, saying, "I humbly pray the Honourable Council to pardon the rudeness of my foreign-trained child and permit her to retire with me from the august assembly." Uncle Otani, without moving, gave a grunt of assent. As I made my last bow at the sliding door and slipped it back in place, my Tokyo uncle tapped his pipe carefully against the rim of the tobacco box by his side. "It is fortunate that Etsu-san seems a reliable woman," he said slowly, "for surely it would be puzzling venture for any of us to take into our family 2 rough American children with their untrained feet, their flouncing garments, and their abrupt speech." Whether that remark was intended to be kind or cruel, I never knew, and whether or not it had influence, I never knew. But after another hour of slow, careful, earnest, and perfectly fair discussion, the council decided that on account of Matsuo's request, combined with the fact that his widow appeared to be a trustworthy person, consent was given to a temporary trial of the experiment. That night, I pulled my cushions in between my children's beds, close, and crept beneath the covers, faint with relief and gratitude. Chapter 25. Our Tokyo Home. A few weeks later, the children and I, with capable little Suzu in the kitchen, were settled in a pretty home in Tokyo. The arrangement with Matsuo's family was that some of the relatives would visit us at intervals to see that everything was satisfactory, and that I was to consult the council about every new, even trifling problem which might arise. I was chained, but I was content. My relatives in Nagaoka were much concerned over my peculiar position, and Mother, because it would be undignified for a young widow to be alone, decided to come and live with us. Not being able, however, to make immediate arrangements, she sent Taki, who was now a widow, and who, because her father and her grandfather had served in our family, had claimed the right to return to Mother and calmly settle herself as a member of the household. When she came to Tokyo, she at once assumed the combined responsibilities of chaperone, housekeeper, cook, seamstress, and commander-general of us all, including Suzu. In less than 3 days, Taki had discovered the best fish shop in the neighbourhood, and in less than a week all second-rate vegetable vendors and fruit peddlers went trotting by our kitchen door, holding their swinging baskets away from the keen eyes of our countrywoman who knew so well when the first blush of freshness was gone. From the first, I relied entirely upon Taki's judgment. Nevertheless, I had some annoying experiences, for to her heart I was still little Etsubo-sama, although her lips acknowledged that I had reached the dignified position of Oku-sama. honourable mistress, and although I had acquired some wonderful ideas and possessed 2 astonishingly active children who dressed queerly and talked too loud, my troubles began the very first night after Taki had closed the outside gates and fastened the front and the kitchen doors. I heard her sliding the wooden panels which ran along the outer edge of the porch overlooking the garden. These were for protection in stormy weather and to keep us safe at night, but when closed they shut out the air completely. "Don't close the armados tight, Taki," I called. "Leave a little space between them. We need fresh air for the rooms." "Ma," cried Taki, with profound astonishment in her voice. "You left your home when you had but little learning, Okusama. Air without the smile of the August sun goddess has poison in it." "But, Taki," I protested, "this is like a foreign house. It has gas for the heaters, and we need outside air even at night." She hesitated, evidently much distressed. "It may be that the air in this honourable foreign house is different," she muttered, "but it seems peculiar. And besides, it is not safe in a great city where burglars live." She walked away, shaking her head and grumbling to herself. Feeling that I had established my authority, I went to bed, only to be awakened by a stealthy, intermittent rumbling, which presently ended in a muffled snap as Taki pushed in the wooden bolt of the last panel. "Well," I said to myself, half provoked, half amused, "even with the jailer of Nagaoka prison, so what could I expect?" Like many Japanese women of the working class, Taki had been obliged to take a large share of the burden of livelihood on her own shoulders. Her husband was a kind man and a good workman, but he drank too much sake, and meant not only a mysterious slipping away of wages, but frequent imprisonment for debt. Whenever this happened, Taki came to our home, and Mother would give her employment until she'd saved enough to set her husband free. One day, while she was working for us, my older sister went out with her on an errand. Just beyond the gate they saw 2 men approaching. One was a well-dressed man, his head covered with the basket mask worn by all prisoners outside the walls. Sister said that Taki stood still, watching the men suspiciously, and did not seem surprised when they stopped. The officer bowed and said pleasantly, "Only 3 yen is due now. Pay that and he is free." "Oh, please, Mr. Officer," exclaimed Taki in great distress. "Please keep him just a few weeks longer. Then I shall have all the debts paid and a little start for the next time. Please keep him just a little longer. Please." The husband, poor man, stood meekly by while his wife and the officer argued, but Taki stubbornly refused to pay the 3 yen, and the officer walked away with his basket-headed prisoner. Taki stood looking after them, triumphant, but a few moments later she pulled a fold of paper from her sash and, wiping her eyes, sniffed a few times and said, "Come, little mistress, we have wasted much time. We must hurry." I said nothing more about not closing the armados, but several days later I had a carpenter put up a wide-open work strip of carved iris, the flower of health, between the eaves and the top of the parlour. At intervals were inserted iron bars run through the hollow tubes of bamboo. Thus we were safe in every way, for not enough poison air could filter through the health-giving blossoms of the carving to injure us, even in the opinion of our good fanatical Taki. The children surprised me by the readiness with which they accepted conditions in this strange land. Hanano, from babyhood, had been attracted by new things, and I concluded that our life of constant change had kept her from homesickness. And 3-year-old Chio, who had always been a contented little thing, seemed so happy in the unbroken companionship of her sister that I did not realize the possibility of her having opinions and desires of her own. While we were visiting, she expected strange things, but when we reached a place that I called home and she found her clothes arranged in drawers and her playthings put where she could get them, she began to miss many things. "Mama," she said one day, coming up and leaning against my shoulder as I sat sewing, "Chio wants—" "What does Chio want?" I asked. She took my hand and led me slowly through our 6 tiny rooms. White mats were on all the floors except the kitchen. In the parlour alcove hung a roll picture with a flower arrangement on the polished platform beneath. A small upright piano stood in one corner. Sliding doors of silk separated the parlour from my own and the children's room, side by side just beyond. In both, standing against the tan-coloured plaster wall, were whitewood chests of drawers with ornamental iron handles. My desk and Hanano's, both low white tables with books and pen stands on top, were so placed that when the paper sliding doors were pushed back, we could see across the narrow porch into our pretty little garden with its well-trimmed shrubbery, its curved path of stepping stones, and its small lake with 9 darting goldfish. The dining room at right angles to our rooms overlooked the garden too. It was the sunniest room in the house. The closets were hidden by sliding doors covered with tan-coloured tapestry, and the long square-cornered fireboxes with drawers, the invariable adjunct of every dining room in Japan, was a handsome one of white birch. On one side was always a cushion, ready any moment for the mistress when she came to talk over house matters with the maid, called from the kitchen just beyond another tan-coloured door where looked a part of the wall. The bathroom, Taki's and Sudzu's room, and the servants' entrance were just beyond. Our own shoe-off place and entrance hall were in front, opening towards the big wooden gates with the camel's-eye door in one of them. From room to room, Chio led me, stopping in each and pointing aimlessly here and there. "Chio wants," she repeated, but her wants were so many that she had no words. The emptiness, which I loved, oppressed her. She longed for the big canopy beds of mother's home, for the deep cushioned chairs, the large mirrors, the big square piano, the flowered carpets and the windows curtained with lace, the high ceilings, the wide rooms, the spaciousness. I looked at the wistful little face and my heart smote me. But when she pulled my sleeve and, burying her face in the folds of my dress, said piteously, "Oh, Mama, take me home to Grandma and Papa's picture. Please, please." I caught her in my arms and, sinking to the floor, hugged her close, and for the first time since I could remember, I sobbed aloud. But this must not last. Where was my samurai blood? Where was my childhood training? Had my years of unrestrained freedom in America weakened my character and taken away my courage? My honourable father would be shamed. "Come, little daughter," I said, choking and laughing together. "Chio has shown Mama what we have not in our new house. Now Mama will show Chio what we have." So gaily we went over the same road. In the parlour I pushed back the low silk doors beneath the moon window, and we saw 2 deep shelves in which were neatly arranged all of Hanano's and Chio's pretty books from America. I pointed to the wonderful panel over the doors, a broad thin slab of wood, strangely delicate and beautiful, carved by unknown years, of dashing waves into its odd, inimitable pattern. I showed her the post of the alcove, only the scaled and twisted trunk of a forest pine, yet so polished that it looked as if it was enclosed in crystal. We looked at the rich, dark wood of the alcove floor, as smooth and shining as Grandma's mirrors in the big parlour at home, I told her, and she bent over to see the reflection of a grave little face, changing, as she looked, into one with a twisty smile. In another room I opened the tiny door of our unused shrine. Within the dainty carved interior stood her father's picture, framed in America, which was to hang over the piano when the carpenter could come to put it up. I showed her the big closets where our bed cushions slept in the daytime, gathering in their silken flowers, talk, music and laughter to weave into pleasant dreams for her to find hidden in her pillow at night. I gently opened the wee mountains of ashes in the dining room firebox so she could see the softly growing charcoal, always waiting with warmth and comfort for anyone who wanted a sip of tea. I had her peep into the tiny drawers, one for small rice cakes of pink and white, in case a child should come to visit, one for extra chopsticks, and one for a tiny can of tea with its broad wooden spoon nearby, but the big broad drawer at the bottom. Oh dear, we didn't need it all. That was made for some old-fashioned grandmother who sometimes, after she had told a fairy story to her little grandchild, would reach in for a long, slender pipe with a silver thimble for a bowl. After 3 whiffs, she would tap it on the edge of the box, just here, 3 times, tap, 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 and then put it away with its fragrant silken bag. Sniff, sniff, poof, poof. Mama doesn't like. To wait for another time of meditation or loneliness, or perhaps for an hour when another dear old grandmother might chance to call. Then there would be 3 more whiffs, or perhaps double 3, while the 2 grandmothers sipped their tea and talked in gentle voices of olden times. And here is where Suzu keeps the boats of the food fairies, I said, all waiting for their burden of good things to eat. I pushed back one of the panels, which didn't look at all like a door, and we peeped into a closet of many shallow shelves, on which, in piles of 5, were wooden bowls for soup, china bowls for rice, oval plates for fish, deep ones for pickles, and many plates and cups and dishes, each shaped for a special purpose, and each decoration telling a story of old Japan. Below were our lacquer tables, each a foot square and a foot high, and piled up a little distance away were our cushions. Just 1 and 2 and 3, for she and her and me, as her nanos sang when Suzu brought them out for our meals. And now the kitchen, I went on. This door doesn't slide, but opens by turning a little bronze pine cone. Step into these sandals, Chio, for no one goes into the kitchen with only foot mittens on, or stockings. Here we are. 1 half the floor is of smooth dark boards, you see, and the other half, step down, of cement. There is a gas range, and close beside it a pottery firebox for the big swelling rice kettle with its heavy wooden top. No bit of waste paper or scrap of any kind must be thrown in that fire, only straw to start it and charcoal to continue it, for it is used just to cook rice, the staff of life for Japan, and we must treat it with respect. Here comes Taki, and now she will show us something, little Chio. That will make you want to run to the big box that smells all camphor-y, just like the forest near Uncle Otani's house, and get out the fur collar that Grandma gave you last Christmas Day. See? Taki stuck 2 fingers in 2 little holes in one of the narrow boards of the floor and lifted it. Then another and another. Next up came a light, broad square of white wood, and there, within easy reach of Taki's hand, was a small cellar, where was a block of ice roughly cut in shelves, on which were set wooden plates of fish and vegetables, eggs and fruit. That's what becomes of the cold, cold bundle the man brings every morning in the straw saddle on his back, I said, and there is Taki's wooden sink standing high up from the cement part of the floor, just like a table with legs made out of water pipes. Now, turn down to the right, down the narrow little hall we go, 5 steps of mine and 8 of yours, and here we are in the bathroom. The oval whitewood tub with its 2 faucets above and little row of gas lights below is so deep that even Mama can kneel with the water up to her chin. Here are the 3 little shelves for our brand bag, cup and toothbrush, each with a carved towel hanger below. And over in the corner is a big bamboo basket for laundry and a coil of hose to water the garden. Oh, it's a very interesting little house, Chio, just like a big playhouse, with Mama at home all the time to play with you when Hanano has gone to school. End of chapter 23. If you are enjoying these audiobooks, please take the time to subscribe, press like, leave a comment, or share this channel with your friends who also enjoy listening to audiobooks. Thank you.